Okay, we are going to dive into data storytelling. So normally when I talk through presentations, we talk about three different steps. We define our story, we figure out who our audience is and what our objective is, then we design our story, we create the visuals that go along with our story, and then we get up and we deliver our story. Today, we're going to be talking about the middle step of building that story visually, especially when we are delivering a data-centric story. The overwhelming universal problem is that we have so much data and we are very tempted to share it all. We think that more is better and we just want to be convincing and show our work. And we want to make sure that we prove our point. Now, let me show you the drawbacks to this, the reason that this doesn't necessarily work. So let's say that I want to tell you about my business and I tell you that I sell digital products and I sell 20 different digital products and I've gathered up all my best data so that you can help me figure out how my business is doing. So I give you this. I give you this information. This is 200 cells of data, and it's overwhelming. It's too much. This is simply too much information for any one person to take in any reasonable amount of time. It's too much. It's overwhelming. And we think we're doing something nice. We're giving all this great information. In reality, it's just simply overwhelming to our audience. So let's talk about what has to happen when we give our audience that information. When we include raw data like this, our audience has to read all of that information. It's 200 cells of data. They then have to analyze it. We're passing our work along to them. We're asking them to analyze just raw data. We're then asking them to figure out what's important. All that data is in the same font, the same size. There's no clear slide title that helps us out. We're forcing them to figure out what's important and then figure out the key takeaways and then hopefully take some action based on the data. When we're trying to ask for something or convince somebody of something, we want them to take action, but we've made it very hard for them to do that. All these four first things, this is our job. We need to do this as the presentation creators so that they can act, especially if we're trying to sell something or ask for something. The easier we make it for them to consume the information, the more likely they are to act. If they don't have to do a ton of work in that first step, the more likely they are to do whatever it is that we want them to do, buy something, approve something, support our proposal, whatever it is. When we have a lot of information, we are very tempted to share it all. Again, we think we're doing something nice, something helpful. We're giving great information when simply it's too overwhelming for our audience. Our job is not to collect information. Our job is to curate information. Think about someone giving you an entire warehouse full of clothes and saying, hey, go pick out whatever you want, versus someone going through that warehouse on your behalf and picking out an outfit that's just tailor-made and perfect for you. Our job isn't just to collect data. Our job isn't to make the warehouse available to people. Our job is to curate data. Our job is to go through the warehouse, get the information, get the data that's exactly right for our audience, and put that story together on their behalf. Audiences do not want all of the data. They want the insights from the data, and they want those insights tailored to their needs and preferences. They want you to do the analytical work. They want you to figure out the insights and then tell them the story. Tell them the story of the insights so they don't have to do that work. So, what do? Data heavy presentations, data overloaded slides, it's a big universal problem. So, how do we fix this? This is what we do. First, we curate. We are not information dumping and data dumping onto people. We curate. Then we determine the insights. Remember, we're not passing along our analytical work to our audience. We're figuring out the insights, and then we're figuring out how to visualize those insights effectively so that our audience can pick up on those insights very quickly. I want you to also know that this is not just true of data slides, but in general, there's an inverse relationship between how much information we have on our slide and how much our audiences can absorb. If we have a slide full, 8-point text, tiny text, tons of data, tons of charts, tons of everything, we're not going to be able to ingest a lot of that as audience members. Whereas if we have a simple, straightforward slide, our audience is much more likely to be able to take all that information in. We should also remember that people's brains are very bad at listening and reading at the same time. If they're reading a slide, they're not listening to us as speakers. And if they're listening to us, they're not reading. They cannot do both at the same time. I want you to think about the image of a backpacker. When you backpack, and for reference, I am an indoor cat, so this is purely theoretical knowledge at this point. But what I'm told is that when you go backpacking, you are incredibly thoughtful and picky about what you pack in your backpack. Everything that goes into your backpack must serve a purpose because everything in your backpack comes at a cost, and the cost is that weight on your shoulders. I want you to think about your slides the same way, that every single thing that goes on a slide should be selected with intentionality because everything that you put on your slide comes at a cost. And the cost is the audience's attention. The audience taking their attention away from you, the speaker, the expert, and putting it onto the slide for a couple of seconds. So whatever you put on the slide has to be so important that it is worth the audience taking their eyes off of you and putting it onto the slide. Think like a backpacker, only add things to your slide with intentionality, remembering that there is this inverse relationship. So again, we talked about how our solution is curating information, not just collecting, and we figure out the insights ourselves, and then we visualize those insights. So big question, how do we actually figure out what the insights are? If we have this great data and we need to get to insights, what do we do? This is where the analytics path to value comes in, and full credit to Brent Dykes here. This book is so good, and he has an amazing newsletter. Follow him online. He has all the things. So he talks about the analytics path to value. Basically, how do we get from raw data to information? So what does that look like? So we start with data. We just have raw data, numbers, like I showed you earlier. Ideally, we're graduating from data to information, then from information to insights, but we don't stop there. We want to go one step further into actionable insights. Again, we're doing this work on behalf of our audience so that they don't have to. So let me show you what this could look like when we're following this analytics path to value. So let's say that I run a bookstore, my dream. The data, the raw data, the bookstore sold 250 mystery novels in March. That's raw data. We don't know why it happened. We don't know what to do with that information. It's just raw data. Now, if we turned this over to our audience, we're not giving them a whole lot to work with. So let's try and go one step further. So we're going from data to information. And now we know, okay, this represents a 40% increase in mystery novel sales, while every other genre only increased a maximum of about 10%. That's super helpful information for us. Now we know that something is happening in that mystery category. So let's continue to move up that staircase there. Now we're digging into causality. Now we know why it happened. That there was a window display in the front window of the bookstore featuring local authors, and there was a book club that started. So now we're getting into causality behind the data. So what do we actually do as a result of that? Okay, we're going to capitalize on these trends, and we're going to make sure that we can do something with this information. So now we have made it just from raw data to actionable insights, and that's our goal. So this is the path that we need to follow in order to get from data all the way to actionable insights. When we're just giving our audience data, they can't do a lot with that, and they're looking for you to analyze. The thing is, if we only present our audience data, raw data, they have to do all of the work in the analytics path to value that we just talked through. That's not their job. We want to ask ourselves, if the audience can only take away one thing from the data, what would it be? So in our mystery novel example, we don't want them to just know how many we sold. We want them to know why it happened and what we should do as a result of it. So think about your data. Think about what you actually want your audience to take away from it, because we do need to figure out the actionable insights first. We need to figure out what the takeaway is in order to build a slide around that takeaway. If we don't figure out that takeaway, we're just going to build a slide with raw data, completely raw data, not really knowing what we want the audience to take away from it. So it's our job to figure out those insights first in order to build a slide that highlights those actionable insights. So to do that, let's just break down the basic parts of a slide. So here is a basic slide, one key data visualization in the middle, title, subtitle, kicker line at the bottom, and then a bit of a call out. Let's break down the different parts here. Every slide more or less only needs two things. Basically, you need a title and a visual. So we have a clear title and subtitle that function as headlines for the slide. They tell us what's going on. And then we have a visual that helps to illustrate that headline. We also have something at the bottom called a kicker line. Think of it as kind of a secondary subtitle, but we have that kicker line that helps drive home the insights and the points. That's all a slide has to be, is a clear title and a visual that supports that title. It does not have to be more complicated than that. Clear title, visual, kicker line if you would like. Let's talk about the jobs of these different parts. Our title and subtitle function as the headline for our slides. When we use a slide title like data or insights, we're not giving our audience a whole lot of clues. We're not telling them what to take away from the slide. Think about your slide title as your headline that tells people what's coming. Then your central visual is the proof and illustration of that headline. What information do you need to visualize in order for people to believe the slide title that you just wrote? I want you to use the litmus test of, if I covered up everything else on the slide except the title and the subtitle, would my audience still understand what was going on? Write your title and subtitle as if you have to summarize the entire takeaway of the slide just with those two lines. Make sure that people can understand the takeaway just from the title alone. So I want to walk through an example of how we can take a dense, not so nice looking data slide and transform it into something a little bit better. So this is a slide. This is as bad as it gets. So with this slide here, this is the before. We have our slide title, it's data. I have a very stretched out screen cap from Excel. I did no work to visualize or do anything here. Now, what you'll see is that I'm forcing my audience to do all the work that I should have done. They have to read this information. They have to figure out what's going on with this information. I didn't do them any favors whatsoever. So hopefully we would change almost everything about this slide because it's super, super ugly. So let's flash through and see how we can make this better. First, we need to actually figure out what the data is saying, because right now we just have raw data, and like we talked about, we need to figure out the actionable insights before we can build a slide around that. So what the data is saying is that there was no correlation between marketing spend and impressions, and in April and June, we had big spikes in impressions. Okay, great. Now we're getting to some insights and some things that we might want to call out in our slide. So we discovered these two things, these two findings. Let's make that our slide title. Let's just go ahead and put the bottom line up front and tell the audience what we discovered from this data. So our slide title, 48% increase in marketing spend yield only 4% more impressions. That's a great slide title because it gives us the takeaway up front. Even if I don't look at that ugly screenshot, I still understand what the data is saying. But a way that we can make this even easier is by visualizing our data. Put the data not in a data table, but in a chart. So there we go. Now we have visualized this data. This is in a 2 y-axis chart where we have marketing spend measured on the left axis and then impressions measured on the right. A 2 y-axis chart is a great way to measure two different variables that are captured over the same length of time or over the same common variable that's measured on your x-axis there. So we have automatically just leveled up this slide in a very big way through a clear slide title and visualizing our data. We can see what's going on with the data so much more quickly than we can with a data table. Let's go one step further though. Let's add some callouts on this chart. And what I mean by a callout is a little text box and some arrows there. And basically what a callout does is says, hey, I want you to look right here. I want you to look right here on the slide. So we don't have to use a laser pointer. We don't have to point with our hands. We don't have to say, hey, I want you to take a quick look at here and here. The slide is doing that for us. It's saying, look directly here and here. I also think the slide would benefit from a key takeaway. So let's add one over here. Our key takeaway is that despite we increased our marketing spend, efficiency declined in the back half of the year. That's very helpful to know. Now we're getting to insights and then one step further into actionable insights. So here's my recommendation based on the data. Hopefully you can see that I've done all of the work on behalf of my audience. I figured it out. I analyzed the data and I gave you a recommendation. All our audience has to do is just ingest the information, and that's exactly what we want. When we're building slides, especially data-centric slides, we need to ask ourselves, what visuals tell the story better than text can? The universal most hated thing about slides is really text-heavy slides. So how can we use visuals better than text to tell a more effective story? A couple examples that I give. I could tell you a story about how one of my favorite memories from a past job is that my car battery died and 3 different team members came out to help me fix my car. It's a great story, but it's not very effectively told with text, whereas adding a picture is a great way to tell that story. The visual is doing more work than just text could. I could give you some information about data and the growth there. Again, text is not the most effective way to do this, whereas a data visualization is so much more effective. We can automatically see what the data is doing just by looking at it. I could tell you that I did this whole process and I did this and did this and did this, and oh my gosh, it's too much text for me to read. I am just tuning out even looking at it. Or I could show you a process flow. This is a much more efficient and effective way to use a visual instead of text. So always be thinking about where you can use text versus visuals. One area that we don't focus on as much, icons, are something that I love adding into a slide. They add visual interest. It's a nice break from bullets, but it helps to tell the story better than just text can. So think about where you can use visuals, a number of visual tools rather than text on your slides to help you tell your story. Always be asking this because visuals can do a lot of work on your behalf. I also want you to think about your slides like a billboard. Think about a billboard. It's minimal text, it's very visual, and it's designed to be consumed quickly when you're speeding down the highway. Think about your slides like billboards more than a magazine article that is designed to be read over a longer period of time. Your slides should be glanceable, not just readable, but glanceable. Can your audience just glance at the slide and understand the takeaway fairly quickly? So remember, all you need for a great slide is a clear slide title that's answered first, and then a visual that helps tell your story. And remember, like a billboard, we need one idea per slide. Every slide should communicate one core idea. I also want you to think about how we can design for clarity. I'm going to give you some quick hit tips here that will help you bring data to life in a way that makes the insights clear, because that's our goal, is to not only make the data clear, but the insights clear. So how can we use design in order to make those insights clear? I'll give you a couple of examples here. So I have a slide here, very unhelpfully called data, and I have some data bars here. Yes, the data is visualized, but there's not a whole lot here that's helping my audience out. So let's do a couple of design things that help turn this from data into actionable insights. So all we've done here, I kept the same data visualization and I just added a better slide title. So data tells us nothing about what we have on the slide. Checking account signups spiked in May. Ooh, now we know something. Now we're getting to some insight. So all we did was we added a descriptive headline, and automatically our audience is guided through that data a little better. Then what I did was add an accent color. And now what I'm doing with the accent color is I'm saying, hey, I want you to look right here. I want you to look at May. Everything else is helpful for comparison's sake, but I want you to look at May. That is what we're concerned about. And color is a great way to direct attention that way. So an accent color is very, very helpful. So we added a headline, we added an accent color that helps direct attention. Then we put a label on here. So it's helpful now. Now we see how many signups that we had in May. Just that little addition of that label helps prevent that question of, well, how many signups did we actually have in May? So we have that label on there. And then we added a call out. This is a 15% year-over-year increase. So automatically we're answering questions that may arise, but we're also helping analyze the data on our audience's behalf. So very quickly, we went from something that gave us no information to something that gave us a good bit of information while still creating a very visual slide that's very high level. The key benefit here is that when we create a really visual slide, it shows that we've done the work on behalf of our audience. It shows that we have done all of that work of reading the numbers and figuring out what's important and figuring out the key takeaways. We have done that work on behalf of our audience, and a clear, clean visual slide shows that we have done that work for them. There is always someone at this point who says, I understand your point, that's all well and good, but my boss really does want all of the data, so this doesn't really apply to me. So here's what I will tell you, and apologies in advance for the gross picture, but I refuse to get rid of this picture because I love it very deeply. Use an appendix. This is where your appendix comes in. I don't know if this is actually what the human appendix looks like. I have to assume yes, because, why would the internet lie to me? But use an appendix. Maybe if there's a doctor out there, you can tell me if this is what your appendix actually looks like. I just know from the Grey's Anatomy pilot about the appendix. So there we go. This is where your appendix comes in. Our goal is to keep the core body of the slide deck tight, visual, concise, and clean. The appendix is for backup information that we will need to reference. I guarantee you that 90% of your audience will be satisfied by the clear, clean, visual story that you've put together in the main body of the deck. The 10% who want to dig into the details, they will want to go into the appendix for additional data, and that is completely fine because we have that ready to go. So I want you to think about your slides in pairs. Every slide in the main part of the deck has a buddy in the appendix. So your very pretty, high-level, visual, insight-driven slide, that goes in the main deck. Again, because 90% of people will be satisfied by that. Then the source data, the backup data, the assumptions, the information, that goes in the appendix. And very importantly, you add a footnote. And on the pretty visual slide, you add a footnote that says, to see the full data set, please reference page 24. So we've done multiple things here. We have satisfied the people who want the high-level visual slide, and the people who want the full data set, we're directing them exactly where to go. We're not using our appendix as just a dumping ground of, hey, here's all the stuff, good luck navigating it. You're directing them exactly where to go. So we're guiding them through that experience. So rather than just dump all of your data into your deck and hoping for the best, put the high-level visual insight-driven slide in the body of the presentation, and then put your backup data in the appendix with a footnote added there. That is what we have for now for data storytelling and how to use visuals and design elements in order to elevate your data-centric presentations and make your insights clear to your audience. And remember, we're always asking ourselves what visuals tell the story better than text can. And I guarantee you these small changes of a very clear slide title, a clear visual with some design elements that direct the audience's attention will go a very long way in ensuring that all your work gets noticed and your insights get the attention and people are not overwhelmed by the data. So let me know if you have any questions and let me know how I can help.